So for anyone who watched my London's Burning retrospective, you may know that I grew up with Fireman Sam. And so as the show I perhaps have the most nostalgia for, I wanted to talk about it. In fact, I basically set up this retrospective in that one, so I've had this planned for a long time. Now this retrospective will cover the first 4 series, as those are the ones I have the most nostalgia for, and there was a big shift in the format and crew behind it with the 5th series onwards, basically being a reboot more than a direct continuation, but I might end up covering that one day. So my nostalgia for this show is a good place to start, as it's the entire reason I care to do this review. While I don't recall personally how I got into the show, I know it was from a VHS that I was given when I was about 2 years old. Due to this, I don't really have anything to say about how I became interested in the long term, other than it being a show I kept rewatching and so ended up with more VHSs, so there were more than half a dozen episodes on repeat at any one time. Then at some point I got the complete collection on DVD, around the time the show returned for its 5th series, also a Christmas episode at some point, which could have also been before, both of which I still own even if the cardboard box has seen its best days, but is still in pretty good condition as I'm the type who cares about such things. Now I did drop off the show as I grew older, because I had other interests, mostly Doctor Who, but for a time they existed together until other films and shows took over. That would have been the end of it until one Christmas in my teenage years when I suddenly decided to rewatch the Christmas episode, and then the show. This quickly became a tradition for years. So before discussing the series or the characters, let's begin with a bit of background for how the show came to be. The show is a creation of ex-London firefighters Dave Gingell and Dave Jones. The duo came up with the idea after purchasing a stop-motion animation book and got the help of Supertech creator Mike Young to pitch the idea to Welsh broadcaster S4C, who picked up the idea. From there the concept was further expanded by Rob Lee, who created the characters and storylines. The show itself was made with stop motion, which based on the timeline of 4 days from of animation would have taken around a month per episode. The first 4 series which we're talking about were all narrated by Welsh actor John Alderton, providing the voices for all the characters, while the ever iconic theme song was sung by Welsh musician Maldwyn Pope. So with the creation of the show covered, let's get into the show itself. Fireman Sam began in 1987 with its first series of 8 episodes, each running for just shy of 10 minutes. This format would last for the majority of the show, with the exception of Series 3, which had 9 episodes, and Series 2, which had a double-length Christmas episode, but was still at 8 episodes. While Series 1 and 2 were made and aired a year apart, the next 2 would have longer breaks in between, with Series 4 being made 4 years after 3. This meant that there were subtle updates between the series, which is most notable with the final one. The show is set in the landlocked town of Pontypandy, although there are some locations outside the town where rescues occur. Then there is also the much larger new town nearby, which almost exclusively appears in dialogue rather than being a place that rescues happen. The show is quite diverse with its use of the fire service. It isn't just fires and cats up trees. There are people stuck in windows, down mines, stuck near toxic chemicals, and many others which do make fires somewhat rare in the show. So that's the general format, so now for Series 1. The first series is the most simplistic due to it being when the show was finding its feet, but it began strongly. Almost every long-standing element of the show was introduced in this series. The show gave us a strong lineup of episodes, with them managing to hold back on the fire until episode 2, rather than just going all in episode 1. With episode 1 being quite a tame episode about the wind, and so we have a kite and a fallen telephone. From there the stories ramp up a bit, with us getting to know the many characters, with them all being in trouble at some point. Although despite the short runtime, many episodes do feature most to all of the cast, which is something which continues into the following series. Now despite Sam being the main character, we do get an episode in which he has a camping trip and so is away from his job, and although he does partake in the action at the end, it's good that an episode demonstrates that firemen are still people at the end of the day. We also get Flat Tire, which is basically a comedy episode, as it focuses on the chaos caused by a tyre that is rolling around Pontypandy. There's no big rescue or event in this one, and so ends up more of a slice of life episode, which I think helps to elevate the more intense episodes. The series finale focuses on fire safety with Telly Trouble, in which Station Officer Steele is giving a speech on television. The second series changed things up somewhat. While aesthetically and cast-wise it's the same, the series was only 7 episodes as opposed to the 8, with the 8th episode being a double-length Christmas special, which despite this feels the same length as a normal episode due to the great pacing, and so it makes the aesthetic the big changer. The series gives us some more characterisation to Sam in the episode Sam's Day Off, through his love for inventing, which ends up putting him in danger. Again, like with camping, demonstrating that he is still just a man at the end of the day, who can be in danger himself. The Christmas episode is somewhat calm, with it getting to have some unique situations for its rescues, that of Trevor getting stuck in a snowdrift, and then Sarah and James trapped on a frozen lake. Despite the Christmas setting, it doesn't treat the lake rescue lightly, with it being quite intense, while the Trevor one is more comedic. It is good to see that despite being Christmassy, the show didn't shy away from being a dangerous time of year. The series also had an episode focused on fire safety, with the episode Safe with Sam, which was set on bonfire night, and so talked about the dangers that were involved with it, with Sam notably breaking the fourth wall to warn the audience at the end. There is also some more general advice with Sam telling the audience what to do if there is a fire.
Get out, get the fire brigade out, stay out.
I'm also assuming this episode's initial release was delayed, as despite being about bonfire night, it aired in December, while the rest of the series was airing through September and October. Series 3 is probably the biggest change-up of the early seasons, as it was the first to introduce an entirely new character, that being Penny Morris, the show's first female firefighter, clearly in response to the growing number of female firefighters at the time, and the show doesn't shy away from that fact, but we'll come back to that later. The series was 9 episodes as opposed to the 8, and so ends up with the same runtime as the previous one. I will note though that on the complete series DVD box set, each disc has 8 episodes, and so episode 1 of series 3 is at the end of series 2, as they skipped the Christmas episode, which really doesn't affect anything, but I just thought it was worth noting. Despite the extra episode, it doesn't change the feeling of the series, although it means we get the usual 8 episodes following Penny's introduction. There was a year break between this and the previous series, but it isn't all that apparent in the show. It also aired slightly later in the year, and so had a Halloween episode, which focused on being a bit creepy, which makes the rescue of Penny more intense, especially where it appears she may be dead. The final stretch of this series is probably the most interesting to me, as it features the episode Brass Band, which as a kid I owned the book version of, and I have no idea where it went. Then we have the episode Lost in the Fog, which is my favourite episode, due to the atmosphere in it. And then finally, and perhaps the most important, Bentley the Robot, which was the episode which terrified me as a kid, and probably played a big part of my obsession with sci-fi. And yes, this is the episode I referred to earlier as being potentially my earliest memory. Obviously it was Bentley who scared me, but I think the fact that this episode also featured the rescue of Penny from the burning station also helped with this fear, as it felt like the most intense situation the series ever had. The 4th series went back to 8 episodes, although there was a 4-year break between series, which caused this one to have a very different look. I'm assuming due to a high quality of film stock, or perhaps it was just scanned at a higher resolution, because this one looks a lot cleaner and the colours pop a lot more. As a kid I always thought that they redesigned the characters' outfits, but no, the outfits were always blue, but they just used to look far darker and near black in the previous series. I never used to like the clean look of this series, and while I don't like it as much as the previous ones, it doesn't bother me as much anymore. The series went back to the 8 episode format, with them all being the same length, and it's a good lineup, which I've definitely overlooked all these years due to me being put off entirely by the cleaner look. We have another episode in which Sam has a day off, with him again being in danger, but probably the most real feeling of all, due to instead of a small fire or a situation that is a bit comical in scale, that it makes you doubt the danger, this one has him in a sinkhole with the threat of being crushed. Now I'm not insulting him being trapped in the shed, but it's a situation which is a bit badly constructed for tension, although as a show which is designed for a young audience, I suppose my adult brain does see the cracks in a good episode. There's also an episode set in Newtown, with Home from Rome, plus the episode Trevor's Bus Sale, which is a great one for demonstrating Norman's nature. I will admit I've never been a fan of the balloon episode. Not that it's bad, but I've just never liked it. Not to mention Quarry Rescue, which for the time was a completely unique rescue for the show. The series in this era ended with the episode Disaster for Dinner, which was another fire safety episode. But instead of telling the audience about safety, it showed how the fire brigade operates and trains for rescues. While this was perhaps not a perfect ending to this era of the show, it's a great one to end it on, due to it featuring the entire cast in various roles and sticking to the education idea that the show always had at play, while also featuring a fire as a rescue which was caused by Sam's invention, which somewhat ties it all together. Despite running for 4 series across a number of years, there were only ever a few characters in the show, with 9 for the first half and then 10 for the second, plus the cats, so technically there were always 10 from the start. Even with the short runtimes of the episodes, most episodes were able to feature the majority of the cast in various amounts of importance, but none are ever gone for too long. The most notable exception to this rule is Penny Morris, due to her late addition to the show in the second half of the era. This somewhat small cast all serve a purpose, from the firefighters that keep everyone safe to the general public who keep the town running, but let's talk about each in turn and get to know them better. The main character is of course the titular Fireman Sam, or based on how everyone calls him Sam in every situation, even in situations where they should be using his last name, Sam Sam. As the main character, he is the most well defined of the cast, with us seeing all sides to him throughout the show, from his job as a firefighter to his part-time inventing, which more often than not goes wrong, with several episodes being based around the problems they cause, which he has to deal with even the final rescue of this era being due to a problem with one of his inventions. This inventing side is also combined with his work once or twice, with a notable occasion when he tries to upgrade Jupiter to run on a remote control, which goes wrong. Due to Sam being the main character, he is basically the only fully competent firefighter in the show, or at least in these early days. He is also the only one we know outside of his job, such as meeting his family through his niece and nephew, Sarah and James, alongside seeing his house. In some ways, due to his nature as the straight man of the show, he is perhaps one of the least interesting. Not to say that he is in any way uninteresting, but when you pair him up against the comedy characters such as Elvis or the troublemaker Norman, then he tends to be the calming presence of the scene. Now while that is true, he is still the action hero of the show, with him always being the one going into danger throughout the show, although rarely alone, which just goes to demonstrate that despite being the main character, he still can't save the day by himself, which works to humanise a character that had the potential to be a one-man team. He's the man we all wanted to be when we were younger. Next we have Elvis Cridlington, who is the comic relief of the firefighters, alongside the station's cook. This makes him one of the most memorable characters, as there are a ton of jokes about how bad his cooking is, with either how much better others are when they are in charge of the kitchen, or when someone negatively interferes with his cooking and nobody is surprised at the final result. Likewise, he is used as the idiot of the group, so things can be explained to him, notably him trying to light a match near fireworks. But this doesn't at all mean he's incompetent as a firefighter, as once he's on the scene, the comedy is left behind. Now there are a few moments of comedy during rescues, but these are in the far less serious situations. Notably him slipping on the ice when he's preparing to pull Trevor's bus from the snowdrift, which is also used to demonstrate the danger of the ice. And compare that to when the twins are stuck on the ice later in the same episode, he is completely serious. This makes him a very well-rounded character who serves the purpose as the one things can be explained to, and demonstrating that even adults don't know everything. While Sam was the man we all strive to be, Elvis is more likely the person we all became. Someone who is well-meaning and generally knows their stuff, but is certainly not perfect in any way. Station Officer Steele is far more serious of a character, but isn't completely detached from comedy, usually due to his pairing with Cridlington, which gives us some of the best jokes. Although he does sometimes get into his own moments of comedy, usually due to his own pride and finding his jokes a lot funnier than others do. He has a strong commanding presence throughout the series, with him commanding great respect from everyone, even the troublesome Norman Price. During a rescue, he is generally the one in charge, but doesn't just stand around, with him playing his part and not just standing on the sidelines, either by operating the pumps or making sure people are safe once out of danger. His best episode being Steel Under Par, where he is being forced to take early retirement. This is quite an emotional episode, as we see the usually upbeat Steel being immediately put into a depressive state by the news, and then we watch as the character prepares for his retirement. But fortunately, at the end of the day, that doesn't occur, and he gets to keep his job, much to everyone's delight. Trevor Evans is one of the most interesting characters, as like with Elvis he is a comic relief character, but has two jobs, as he is primarily a bus driver, but also an auxiliary firefighter, who often stands in during other characters' days off, or takes part in training with the others. There are two running jokes with him, the first being that he is terribly unreliable as a bus driver, with him always being late or having mechanical issues, while the other is about his fear of heights and is barely able to use ladders despite being a firefighter. These two running jokes are often used, but sparingly enough that it doesn't end up becoming his character. In all aspects of his character, he is someone who wants to help, even to his own detriment, whether that be to climb up a tree to help Rosa, or to climb onto a roof to retrieve a cricket ball, or just trying to help the kids fly their kite even though they know how to do it. This leads to him being the character who is the most likely to get injured, with them more often than not just being small things. He does have a bit of a love triangle between Dillis and Bella, although it's more of a background element of his occasional flirtations, which do seem more along the lines of him being quite polite rather than interested. Norman Price is probably the most famous character of the show other than Sam. He is the troublemaker of the show, often getting himself or others into trouble. This by no means makes him a bad kid, as bar a few occasions his pranks are harmless, with the obvious exception being when he greases the pole at the fire station, but soon enough gets his comeuppance. The other notable example being when he switches Bentley's control tape and nearly burns down the fire station with Penny inside, which was far more accidental than intentional in his defence, although is made to pay the price later. This is a running theme with Norman, that he will always be taught a lesson where his pranks are in any way dangerous, with him obviously understanding the consequences, which is why it's usually a harmless prank going wrong. Norman is often in danger due to his own troublemaking, such as falling into a mine due to running away from some wasps after stealing a cake, or getting a saucepan stuck on his head. It's not too often of an occurrence, but they often serve as the punishment rather than anything enforced by others. One of the strongest aspects of Norman is his bond with Sam. Due to him lacking a father, it's clear he sees Sam as that father figure, someone he can look up to and admire. His misbehaving probably comes from this upbringing, not to say that Dillis is an incompetent mother, but does baby him a lot, while also having to run a business alone. The importance of Sam in his life is clear on several occasions, with what the most notable being in the Christmas episode, when Norman receives a gift from Sam alongside Sam's own family. Speaking of Sam's family, Sarah and James are the only two we ever see, with them being his niece and nephew respectively. The two end up more as a double act rather than individual characters, as they are very rarely seen apart. In fact, I can't actually think of a point where they are, at least for a notable amount of time. As mentioned, they are Sam's only family, and so they spend a lot of time together, with their presence allowing him to have more personal stakes during some rescues. The two are more often than not paired up with Norman due to them being the kids of the show, with them on more than one occasion being put into dangerous situations because of him. They don't really have majorly separate personalities, they're more so just the girl and the boy of the duo, but given their ages that's not something to complain about, and are still distinctive enough to tell apart, or guess what one will do, with Sarah often being more cautious while James is more likely to do something dangerous, but this can occasionally switch depending on what the activity is. Dillis Price is the mother of Norman Price and the owner of Dillis' store, which is a convenience store that is the scene of many incidents, or just generally the place people buy everything from. Her main dynamics are with Norman, obviously, Trevor due to the romantic interest, and opposing business owner, Bella, with her having a strong rivalry with the latter. Often the two are shown to be verbally sparring, with Dillis almost always coming off the worst, with her coming across somewhat racist at times, but I think that's more her denseness than anything else. You can sometimes understand where Norman's worst traits come from with her, while at others he clearly has gained much enjoyment from annoying her. I will admit that she is the easiest character to dislike due to her rivalry with Bella, and potentially some of her business practices, as shown by her trying to sell a broken folding chair to Steele, but these things also end up making her one of the funniest characters in the show. Bella Lasagna is the character who stands out the most accent-wise, as the only one who clearly isn't from the area, with her being from Italy. She runs an Italian restaurant opposite Dillis' store, with the two of them often getting into sparring matches with each other, with Bella being the far less aggressive and more subtle opponent. She's quite a timid character, often getting into terrible panics when something goes wrong. She is probably the character with the least to say about her, but is the only one to own a pet, in the form of her cat, Rosa. Penny Morris is the last character introduced in the era of the show, and is the only one who wasn't a part of the initial cast. Alongside that, she is the only female firefighter, and so was introduced as to reflect the changing state of the service at the time. Her initial episode is a great one, as it perfectly introduces the character, through her identity being kept a secret while demonstrating her technical abilities, and so takes everyone aback for a moment when they actually see her. Now, due to this being a kid show, there isn't a resentment or hatred of her. Instead, Steele is just taken aback for a bit, not being sure how to address her, with Sam stepping up. And I think Penny says it best herself.
Well, thanks, Trevor, but just think of me as one of the boys.
Once this episode is over, her being female is never mentioned again, and instead she becomes a recurring character in most episodes of Series 3 and then a few of Series 4. I think this treatment of her as just a fact of life was the best way to go about using her. She's also the second most competent firefighter in the show, and perhaps even more so than Sam, but we just don't see enough of her to be sure. We know a bit more about her outside of her job as a firefighter than Elvis and Steele. Not all that much, but we actually see her house after moving in Series 4. The last thing I want to talk about is the show's music, as it's great and a real backbone of the show. Outside the main theme, which itself is incredibly iconic, the most notable piece of music would definitely be the rescue theme, which plays in every episode. The rescue theme itself isn't very intense, but is rising, with really building up to the rescue. There are a lot of recycled themes of characters and locations throughout, which while are of their time in terms of their instrumental construction, with a lot of windpipes and other wooden sounding instruments, they hold up really well. The fact that I can't actually find clean versions of these just to listen to is incredibly annoying, as it's one of my favourite soundtracks of all time, even if that's mostly due to nostalgia. So hopefully from all that, it's clear that Fireman Sam is a show that I care about a lot. Well, I did directly state that at the start. That should have been more subtly explained through this review. Of course I'm heavily biased in the show's favour, due to nostalgia, but it's such a competently put together show that even without the rose-tinted glasses, it's still a great series. Nostalgia is a powerful thing, but a strongly crafted series is far more so. And one that I can still go back to as an adult and find new things to enjoy about it and things to say, really shows the dedication that was put into making it by its creators and its crew.